All right. So, yeah, for today, we're going to be going over my whole door knocking process, the framework that has best served me, like how to best prepare for it, and yeah, how to utilize it to get as many listings as we can. So for door knocking, whether you love it or hate it, it is a incredibly powerful tool and prospecting means in order to get new now business, right? And in terms of like our ROI for our time, the intent is to get as many listings as possible because we all know that listings lead to more listings and more deals. And especially if we're shopping for another buyer, we could end up in a situation where we get three deals out of one deal, right? So again, note that the intent with like all of our door knocking activities, it's really to create relationships. I always go into it with the like with the thought of just building relationships and really to get CMAs. CMAs are the sole reason, like whether we're knocking for a listing, a buyer, or an open house, it's really just to get CMAs and to develop those relationships. Okay. So, in order to best prepare here, we'll kind of go into just my preparation process as well as, oh, let's zoom in on this a little bit. Close some of these. Yeah, so in terms of preparation, so I always like to bring a flyer depending on whether we're doing it for a listing, an open house, or for a buyer. I'll have yeah, just something that states like, hey, like we have a cash buyer that's looking in your area. We're hosting an open house this weekend. Or like if we have a listing coming live, like I'll post some information on the listing. And then I like to include a QR code as well. And that'll take them to either my home evaluation tool where they can go in and get a quick CMA from our website, or you can post it to like a Linktree account where they go to all your social stuff like that. And there's a lot of easy templates that you can find on Canva. I'll probably be posting my template that I use within the agent school community as well. And then what I also like to do, and we'll kind of go into this here in a second, is really to like do a little bit of research on the community. If you're farming that neighborhood specifically, you should have a good idea of this anyways. But just understanding like the current active listings, the pendings and solds. And the reason that oh, I didn't write this in here. So the reason I like to do this is because I like to use it as a form of social proof in my conversation in order to push for the CMA. So we use it and essentially say like, hey, this home sold for X over asking in 5 days. This other one sold for X over asking in 10 days. Are you curious to see how this has affected the value of your property? And that's where we shoot for the CMA. And then in terms of how to dress, right? So we're like, it's really important to understand that we want to dress appropriately for the weather and for the neighborhood, right? Because if we're dealing with like a really blue collar type of community where you're dealing with a lot of like starter homes or townhomes, stuff like that. Dressing in like a suit and tie, like people aren't going to really take you that seriously, right? And on the contrary, if you're in like a super like luxury bougie neighborhood, if you're dressing up in a hoodie and shorts and flip flops, it's not going to look well either. So just have some common sense and understand like the type of client avatar that you're working with. If you're dealing with more white collar upper scale luxury people, you want to be dressing that part. And if you're dealing with more like new family, move up family, blue collar type of people, you want to kind of dress in alignment with that. Because again, like everyone likes to do business with people that are most similar to them. So dressing again, it's the first impression that most people are going to have with us, and we want to play the part, right? We also want to look as little of a threat as possible, especially if you're doing it kind of later at night in the evening. We want to always position ourselves to disarm the prospect, which we'll get into. But I like to try avoid like wearing any hats or any sunglasses. And I also like to take a step back and step down like one or two stairs as far as possible so they don't feel threatened when they come to the door, right? And then in terms of when to knock, I've found that the best times for me are between 3 and 8 p.m. And in the afternoon and evening. As you get later in the evening, you'll likely start dealing with more people that are having dinner. They'll start being a little bit more upset that you're interrupting them. However, if you come with like a positive mindset and attitude, you can still take the conversation and guide it. If you are knocking on the weekend for an open, like your best times are going to be between 9 and 12, right before the open house. And then usually when I go out at the very minimum, I like to do at least 50 doors. I always shoot for two CMAs, especially if I'm going somewhere else in the city, like on the other side of the city. I want to make sure that I'm getting at least two CMAs because two CMAs typically lead to one listing presentation. And we want to make sure that we're getting the ROI out of the intention, right? So, for me, I know that between every 50 to 100 doors, I'll get two CMAs. And then two CMAs will lead to one listing presentation. And then again, there's going to be some days where we do 100, 150 doors and don't get any CMAs. But generally over, like at the very, very minimum, I like to shoot for 50, but I always try to shoot for 100. Okay. And then I like to use a application called Sales Rabbit. If you haven't used Sales Rabbit before, it is a tool that a lot of people use for door-to-door sales. It's absolutely free. And it's really, really effective in the terms of like if we're farming a specific neighborhood, you can mark all of the houses to note like which ones have answered, which ones haven't answered, which ones are interested, which ones aren't interested. And then if you get a CMA or a lead out of any of them, you can actually mark that property. And it's really cool because when you're done the day, you can tally up like how many doors you knocked or how many leads that you added. You can you can circle the area, you can query how many you've done for that day for tracking purposes. And it keeps everything on like plotted on a map so you can always go back and refer to it. And then like if you're farming that specific area, you can maximize the amount of conversations you have out of each house because you if they didn't answer one day, you can go back and knock it the same day until you get in contact with that resident. So very, very strongly recommend Sales Rabbit if you haven't implemented that already. Okay. So yeah, any questions so far, Nav?
No, it's amazing contact with the sales rabbit. So it works. I guess it works everywhere. It's just a map. Is it like a map or?
Yeah, it's literally just like a GPS. And it'll zoom into your location, and then you literally just like add marks to each of the houses. And I do that. Yeah, I literally do that while I'm waiting for them to come to the door.
That
So
is
I'll
amazing. That's amazing.
yeah, it's really, really cool. And I was doing it like I was when I first started door knocking, I wasn't keeping track of anything, but it's really, really tough. Like if you have a conversation and you want to come back and keep chatting with that person, or if you want to, yeah, like I said, if you want to keep farming that neighborhood, and you want to get the most out of all of that neighborhood, you have to keep track of all the doors that do and do not answer. Because like for an example, there's this one neighborhood here in Calgary that I was farming very adequately. It was five different streets, but I went up and down those streets probably five or six times before I exhausted all of those houses. Right. So it's incredibly effective and it definitely a must have if you're door knocking consistently. Um, so now here's my door knocking framework, and there's a lot of different scripts and frameworks for knocking doors. Like everyone has their own way of going about it. This is the framework that has best served me, and it kind of encompasses all of my sales tactics over the years, adding social proof, developing relationships, and yeah, as long as you understand the framework, you can guide the conversation to where it needs to go. Okay. So what's really important to understand, and we'll go into like the different reasons for knocking and how to approach it, but the framework generally remains the same. And as long as you understand this framework, you can essentially guide the conversation to where it needs to go. Okay. So first, I like to like when they answer the door, I'll do something to disarm the prospect. So either with a joke or just state like, hey, I'm not really here to sell you anything. Because if you think about it, like we are interrupting these people, right? We are interrupting the prospects and their guard will be high. And we need to break down their walls so they're more open to having a conversation. So I'll say, like, hey there, my name is Mason. I'm not a politician or here to sell you anything. I'm just a local real estate agent in the neighborhood. Or I'll say like, hey, my name is Mason. I'm not here to sell you any buy balls, water machines, or security systems. I'm just a local realtor. Because again, we want to break the ice a little bit. We want to make a little bit of a joke. And just again disarm the prospect. Then we go into like the reason for the knock, right? And we have to go into why that we're on their doorstep. And especially if you're dealing with a type A type of prospect, they're going to be pretty, right to the chase. And we want to get into it pretty quickly. So if we're knocking for the open house, right? If you don't have your own like listing to work, find one in the community that you're looking to farm and start working it, right? And the more you work in that area, the more people recognize your face and the more business you'll get from it. Okay. So I'll just say something along the lines of like, hey, you know what? I'm just letting everyone know we're hosting an open house this afternoon at 123 Apple Street, and I'm inviting in all the neighbors in to check you out. And they're gonna look at you a little bit funny most times, and because they're like in their minds, they're like, well, we already live in the neighborhood. Why would we want to come into an open house, right? And that's exactly what we want them to think. And you essentially say like, hey, yeah, it looks like you have a beautiful home already as well, and I wouldn't expect you to move down the street, but it's a perfect opportunity to choose your neighbor. So if you have anyone that is looking to move into the neighborhood, this would be a really good opportunity to get them into a property here. Okay. And then if you're actively shopping for a buyer, right? The framework changes a little bit, but then the rest of the framework remains the same. Okay, so if you're shopping for a buyer, we essentially just say something along the lines of like, hey, I have a client that is super desperate to get into the neighborhood. We've checked out everything in the MLS. We've checked out all the properties already. It's just really not cutting it for them. But I promised them I would chat with all the residents and learn more about the neighborhood and really help them find their dream home. Like, do you know anyone looking to make a move anytime soon? Right. And that'll just kind of open up the door for the conversation. And then I'll get into some of the specifics of the neighborhood. Okay. Now we go into the qualification, and this is where we start to open up the conversation, develop the relationship, and really just find out like what they enjoy about the neighborhood, what they like about their house, if they have like any current dissatisfactions, right? And really start digging so we can start building a little bit of a gap and position ourselves to help solve a problem. Okay. So the number one question I usually ask is like, how long have you lived here for? And the reason I open this up with is because like if they just moved there, usually they're not going to be that privy to having a conversation about doing a CMA or listing presentation. And the average person likes moving around that 3 to 5 year mark. So like if they're within that 1 to 3 years, like as soon as they tell me that, I'll usually like back off a little bit. And because again, I understand that they just moved there, they're probably not looking to make a move. So I'll just say like, hey, where did you move from? What inspired you to move here to this community? What did you not like about the previous community? What do you like about this one? How do you like it so far? And then I always like to crack a joke and say like, "Hey, do you have like any neighbors that you want me to knock on and try to get rid of?" And they'll laugh, right? And then if it's like 4+ years, this is where you can really start digging into some of the like the current dissatisfactions and stuff like that. So I'll say like, "Hey, that's awesome. You must really love it here. What's your favorite part about the community? What inspired you to move from your previous house or previous community into this one? Is there anything that you would want to change about the neighborhood or your current living situation? Okay, and you want to dive into a little bit of those pain points because this is where we're going to start digging a little bit to widen that gap. So they'll say like, oh, you know what? Yeah, like we moved in here. We're like our kids have moved out. We're looking to move into something a little bigger, a little smaller. I don't like the community, and we just want to keep digging in and go like 3, 4 layers deep, right? So I'll say something along the lines of, okay, awesome. So you're looking to upsize, like tell me a little bit about your family. Like, is it too much to maintain? Is it Are you not liking the neighborhood as much? Like, again, we want to go in and ask deep questions to help build that gap and create a little bit of urgency, right? Then I like to go into like the status of the market, understand like what they understand about the market and how it has affected the value of their property. Okay. So and this will kind of help like facilitate the conversation and their decision to move. So I'll say something along the lines of like, okay, have you seen what's going on with the market lately? If they say yes, I'll ask them like, okay, perfect. Like, what have you heard or seen out there? If they said no, I'll be like, okay, awesome. Well, right now it's a really cool time. Like, just to give you an example for something in Calgary, like it's a very, very heavy sellers market, lots of buyers, which is driving house prices up. We're in multiple offer situations, and then I'll ask them, okay, like with all the added buyer interest, we're getting multiple offer situations. What do you think that does for property values? Do you think it drives it up or down? They'll say up. Okay. And then, yeah, and then just ask them, okay, like, do you know how this has had an effect on the inventory here in Calgary or in your community? They'll say, oh, it probably went up. Okay, perfect. So then from here, this is where I like to go into social proof and kind of going back to my previous comment of like understanding the where are we here? Yeah, like the active pendings and solds. Usually I will print out a summary of like 5 to 10 active pendings and solds and just walk them through, okay, like this is kind of like what we're seeing from the like for some of the other listings in the neighborhood. Okay. Because it's going to set the groundwork, right? Um, if I've done other CMAs in the neighborhood, I will also say like, hey, I spoke to John 2 doors down. Like their property value actually went up by an additional $150,000 over the last 5 years. We also, like with all these active pendings and solds, this one sold for $50,000 over asking in 3 days. This one sold for $20,000 over asking in 10 days. And then I'll ask, okay, are you curious to see how this has affected the value of your property? It's very, very important that we ask it this way because again, we're shooting for the CMA, but we're not directly asking for it, right? We're trying to position it from a frame of value. And also inspire that curiosity because from a homeowner's perspective, most of them will always like want to see how their investment, no matter how long ago that they moved into their property, has appreciated. Okay. So are you curious to see how this has affected the value of your property? And this now we want to shoot for the CMA, and this is where we take some specific information on the property so we can pull away. We can pull up some of the comps when we're back at our office or we're offline, and then use it as a means to schedule the listing presentation either later in the day or later in the week. Okay. So here's what I'll do, Mr. Prospect. Let me take some quick information on your home, a little bit about the property, and then what I'll do is I'll take this back and compare some of the similar properties in the area, and then I'll shoot over a value that you can expect to get for your home if you were to list it on the market today. Okay, does that sound good? Most of the time they'll say yes if they're open to it, and then you ask them, okay, can I get the number of bedrooms, bathrooms, and square footage of the property? They'll say yes. Okay, perfect. And while this is going on, guys, I will be just writing this down in the notes app on my phone. So really, really quick and easy. Number of bedrooms, bathrooms, and square footage. If they've done any renovations, we need to know about that as well. And if there's any other specifics, we want to know about that as well. Sometimes, and this happens maybe 20-30% of the time, they'll actually take you on a tour of the property right then and there. It'll be pretty hard without having the comps directly handy to pull together a full CMA and get them an actual estimated value. However, it's really really good to understand like the internals of the property as well as some of the finishings. You can ask to take a few photos just so you have a visual of it. That way, when you pull the comps offline, you can use that to determine the value of the property. Okay, and then yeah, and then make sure you get their phone number and email to send it to them, and then you can mark their address after the conversation. Okay, and then from there, and this is the single-handedly the most important question that I've asked. This single-handedly has got me into more houses, into more listing presentations than the door knocking framework itself. And this is just like asking for the referral, right? Because like what you do or what I've done is I'll ask them, okay, do you happen to know anyone in the neighborhood that's looking to make a move? And if they say no, you can ask, okay, well, if you think of anyone, here's my flyer, here's my card. We have a great referral program in place, and we'll happily cut you a nice referral fee if you send anyone our way, right? And what happens almost every time I go out is there'll be someone on their porch that sits and says, okay, I know that that person, and that person are looking to make a move in the next 2 to 3 months. So just by asking that question, you start isolating which neighbors you know are specifically in the market or actively exploring making a move. And that you can do, you can mark, and then you can just keep showing up on their doorstep until you get in touch with them. And I cannot emphasize this enough. Whether the prospect is interested or not, we always ask this at the end of every single conversation because again, this has gotten me into more houses, into more listing presentations than everything else above this combined. So yeah, and that's pretty much it, guys. And then from there, there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can pull the CMA together, fire it over to them. For me personally, I like to do the CMA. I'll like have an estimated value and I'll just pop up on their doorstep again and then ask if we can do like a full property tour. And then from there, I'll go in and sit in and do a full listing presentation right then and there. Usually, if you send the estimated homes value, it doesn't give you as much leverage to get into the property and do a full listing presentation. So I'll just show up on the doorstep a couple days after and then ask to do a full property tour and then do a listing presentation right then and there. So yeah, that's essentially it. That's my door knocking framework in a nutshell. Serves me very, very well, guys. Obviously take this and innovate on it. And yeah, we'll leave it open for questions. Nav, any questions on your end?
No, that was remarkable. There's a lot of content there, and it's really good content, and you nailed it.
Awesome, perfect. Do we have anyone else here today? Sat? Oh, Sat's in here as well. Sat, what's going on, man?
Oh, my camera's way off. Hey, yeah, good, good. Door knocking is one of those challenging ones, right? Like, because this day and age, people just don't like to open the door to strangers. But I like the way that you start with the with a bit of a joke when if you get the door open. That's good. I
Mm-hmm.
like that. Um, I like to write down too in my notes. I use the notes app as well. I like to write down if I see a dog in the background or something like that, and say, oh, how's the pup doing today or whatever. If I come when I come back a second time. But yeah, it's a tough one. Door knocking's a hard one, especially if you're you're afraid of rejection.
It's yeah, it's one of those things to overcome, right? Like, yeah, the majority of people that answer aren't in the market, but I like every time that I go out, like I'm reluctant to, but after I get there, I always have at least one or two really really good conversations and it kind of makes up for everything, right? And it like if anything, I think I've maybe had one bad day where like it was just terrible and I just kept getting rejected, but usually like I have one or two really good conversations that just make it all worthwhile and I actually enjoy it, right? But it also like one thing that I learned the hard way is that you also want to knock in neighborhoods where you're dealing with people that are similar to you, right? So for me, like, I come from an engineering background. I deal better with more white collar people. So I made the transition for more blue collar neighborhoods to white collar neighborhoods, and immediately like it just completely changed everything for me. I was able to get more like get in the door with more people, have deeper conversations, and more listing presentations. So
In
yeah,
regard in
but
regards
it's
to
go
the
ahead.
CM in regards to the CMA, like I mean, I offered a CMA to this one, and didn't realize I didn't do my homework, I guess, but I didn't realize there's only like 6 houses in that neighborhood. I mean, it was a bit of a listing presentation also though, and nothing had moved even when it was hot. Like there was no movement going on at all. So I had no comparables to pretty niche area, pretty unique market, but it worked out okay. I mean, I'm still nurturing that client or that
Yeah, so that's
prospective
another
client.
thing that I didn't touch on, guys, and that's really, really important to understand. So yeah, like initially when I first started, I was knocking in neighborhoods where there wasn't a lot of movement. And that puts you in a position where you're kind of swimming upstream, right? Because if there's not a lot of movement, there's going to be a lot of there's going to be a lot of resistance, and it's just going to be harder and harder to get deals through the door. So usually, like when I've exhausted a neighborhood and I go into a new one, I'll look up the active pendings and solds, and I'll see like what the movement is in that specific neighborhood. Because if it's obviously everything in Calgary is moving really quickly right now, but there are still some neighborhoods that are performing a lot better than others. So again, everything we want to focus on our intent and ROI, and where we're going to get the most from the time that we are investing is where the most properties are moving. So you have to kind of determine that price point and then that area in order to make sure that we're getting the most out of the time and effort that we're putting in. So what I would challenge for you to do, Sat, next time that you do go out, is to just find a neighborhood where there's at least 5 to 10 sales within the last 90 days. That way you can use those as social proof when you are going into the conversations. And then you also know that things are actively moving. So you can use that as a tool to get in front of people, to go get in the door and have listing presentations, and then use that again kind of as leverage to
Mhm.
get people across the line. But if
Yeah,
if nothing's moving, it's really, really tough to convince someone to list, especially if you don't have many comparables, right?
yeah, for sure. No, good point. Good point.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Yeah, great point to bring up though. Any question or sorry, Sat, any other questions, comments, feedback?
No, I'm just happy I could jump on today. I had a slow day in the morning, so I'm like, oh, I've got time to jump on.
Perfect. Perfect. Did you guys get some value from the call here today?
Yeah,
Lots of value.
are you gonna be dropping that in the chat or sending that out, that script?
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Yeah, that's
Awesome,
good.
guys. Well, yeah, thanks again for hopping in. We will be right back here tomorrow at 9:30 for everything pertaining to content and social media. Thanks again for
Thank,
hopping in, guys.
Awesome. Have a
thank you,
good day,
Mason.
guys.
Bye.
Ciao.
See ya.